And just as my mother-in-law went to the cupboard to get the Tupperware, suddenly my father-in-law collapsed and fell out of his chair. Everyone was looking at him, and he's holding his stomach. He seems to be in a lot of pain. What's wrong with you? And then my father-in-law said something that caught me by surprise. I just ate a little bit of food from the kitchen. Why is my stomach suddenly upset? Did you eat some of that? I didn't miss my mother-in-law's comment. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a 20-year-old housewife. My husband Vernon and I got married last year. We are the same age, so our conversations and values are very compatible. We get along very well because of that, and we are just as much in love after we got married as we were before we started dating. However, there was one thing that bothered me a little bit when we got married. When we went to my in-laws to say our wedding greetings, I noticed that my mother-in-law was a bit old-fashioned. When you get married, you come to our house and live with us, right? My mother-in-law asked us as if it was a given. My husband and I both said at the same time, "What?" My husband and I had no intention of doing that. So my husband said, "No, we are planning to spend our married life alone for ourselves." My mother-in-law said, "What? Why? You are the eldest son." Both my husband and I were troubled by this. Then my father-in-law said, "That's an old-fashioned way of thinking. Do whatever you want, Vernon and Elizabeth." He put the matter to rest by saying like that. But there was a further problem that made the atmosphere worse. Neither my husband nor I had planned to have a wedding ceremony. I don't like to do anything too fancy. We were talking about how we would like to use the money for travel and so on instead of the wedding ceremony. When I told my parents-in-law about this, my mother-in-law's face turned green once again. How can you not have a wedding? As I mentioned earlier, my mother-in-law is an old-fashioned person. She was vehemently opposed to our idea of not having a wedding. How should we tell our relatives that eldest son won't have a wedding? My mother-in-law thinks the eldest son is the most important, so she doesn't approve of any ideas that don't conform to her beliefs. But again, my father-in-law helped me out. None of the relatives care about the wedding. They just think it's a great opportunity to have a nice meal. After a while, they'll forget they didn't have a wedding. So, if you guys decide not to have a wedding, that's fine. My father-in-law was very kind and respected our opinion. It saved us from being forced to adopt my mother-in-law's old ideas. Well, my mother-in-law was not happy about it. So, we got married without a wedding and started living together on our own. I became a housewife to support my husband. I feel very happy doing housework and making lunch and dinner for my husband every day. I think it'll be even more fun when we have children someday. Then, about 2 months after our marriage, my parents-in-law asked my husband if we would like to visit them. Both my husband and I had some disagreements with my mother-in-law, so we were a little worried. But we hadn't visited my parents-in-law's house since we got married, so we thought we should visit them. I was bracing myself for my mother-in-law's attempts to bully me, but Surprisingly, she didn't do anything mean. On the contrary, she was very kind. If you have any questions about being a housewife, you can always ask me. I have all kinds of recipes and I'll teach you everything I know. My mother-in-law loves to cook and she often invites neighbors over. She says that her home parties are very popular and that she hosts them regularly. In fact, I had a home-cooked meal prepared by my mother-in-law on this day, and it was very delicious. Not only my father-in-law, but also my mother-in-law is very kind, and I felt that I didn't need to worry about the anxiety I felt. My husband felt the same way. He felt that it would be no problem to visit his parents once in a while. Then, about 3 months later, my parents-in-law asked me to have a dinner party at their house. Since we had trusted them so much the last time, we were happy to go to their house. There, my mother-in-law served us food that I had only seen in expensive restaurants. My husband also praised her. "You're getting better and better at cooking. You didn't make anything like this when I was a kid. Your food is really delicious. Thank you for preparing so many amazing dishes." My mother-in-law smiled happily as I thanked her. She told me to eat a lot. I had a great time. But that night, I had a terrible stomachache. And as I sat in the bathroom, I began to feel faint and weak. "Hey, Elizabeth, are you okay?" My husband's voice faded away. When I woke up, I was on a bed in a hospital. Apparently, my husband called an ambulance and I was rushed to the hospital. The doctors said they couldn't figure out what was wrong. They said it wasn't food poisoning or anything. I only had an idea that maybe there was too much olive oil in the pasta I had for lunch. I never found out what it was after all. After that, I was put on an IV drip and took a good rest. That helped me feel better, and my husband and I went home and went to bed. What the hell was going on? But I never had any more symptoms after that. But 2 months later, the same thing happened again. Suddenly I felt sick. The only thing that was the same as last time was that it was after eating my mother-in-law's cooking at my parents-in-law's house. Was my mother-in-law's food rotten? But my husband, who ate the same food, was totally fine. But a month after that, the same thing happened after we had dinner at my in-law's house. I invited a friend over for lunch to discuss why this was happening to me. Isn't that coming from stress? I got a little nervous when she said that. I thought I was being completely trusting and open-minded. But maybe somewhere along the way, I had developed a bit of a nervousness when I was with my mother-in-law. Besides, I was getting sick every time I went to my parents-in-law's house, so my husband was worried too. Therefore, my husband said we shouldn't visit my parents-in-law's house for a while. I don't know the cause, but this always happens when we eat at my parents-in-law's house. My husband said it has something to do with my mother-in-law's cooking. I wonder if that's the case. After that, my mother-in-law contacted him several times to ask if we wanted to have dinner with her. My husband always refused, thinking of me. However, after a while, we got another invitation to a dinner party, and this time there was a reason we couldn't refuse. My brother-in-law and his wife were coming to my parents-in-law's house for their wedding greeting. I was a little depressed because I had been feeling better recently by not going to my parents-in-law's house. My husband told me I didn't have to eat so much. I decided to try not to eat as much as possible. And then the day of the party arrived. My mother-in-law was as kind to me as ever. As long as we talked normally, I didn't feel sick. Maybe there was something wrong with the food after all. A little later, my mother-in-law and his wife arrived. We had a nice conversation with them. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was preparing the dishes with great skill. And more dishes were being laid out on the table. My mother-in-law's home-cooked food still looks beautiful and very delicious. In fact, the food I've eaten so far has tasted very good. So I still couldn't understand why I was getting sick, no matter how many times I thought about it. As soon as we sat down, my mother-in-law suggested that I eat the food. Elizabeth, you said you liked this dish, didn't you? I made it very delicious today, so please try it. When my mother-in-law said this to me, I didn't know what to do. Then my husband came and said, Elizabeth is a little sick today, so let her pick up what she can eat when she can. But my mother-in-law said, well, then this amount of food should be fine, right? She put a small plate in front of me with a little less food on it. When I was wondering what to do, my brother-in-law said to me, Elizabeth, if you're not feeling well, you don't have to force yourself. I've already said hello to you, so if you feel sick, please don't hesitate to go home and get some rest. Apparently, my husband told his brother and his sister-in-law about everything. It seemed that my brother-in-law and his wife, who knew what was going on, helped me. My mother-in-law thought she couldn't force me to eat her food. Well, then I made it, so put it in a Tupperware and take it home, she said. I wondered why she wanted me to eat it so badly, but I figured that if I was taking it home, I didn't have to eat it anyway. I replied, okay, thank you very much. And just as my mother-in-law went to the cupboard to get the Tupperware, my father-in-law suddenly collapsed and fell off his chair. We all turned our head to look at him, and he was holding his stomach and seemed to be in a lot of pain. What's wrong with you? He still hasn't touched the food on the table. What the hell is going on? And then my father-in-law said something surprising. I just ate a little bit of food from the kitchen. Why is my stomach suddenly upset? Did you eat some of that? I didn't miss my mother-in-law's comment. My husband called an ambulance right away. My mother-in-law accompanied my father-in-law to the hospital. We were stunned at my parents-in-law's house. But I was thinking about what my mother-in-law had said earlier. Apparently, my brother-in-law's wife had heard her too. And we thought that there might be a secret in the kitchen. We decided to investigate the kitchen where my mother-in-law was standing. And we found something surprising. We drove to the hospital where my father-in-law was taken. As soon as we got through the hospital's reception desk, we went to his room and heard voices from inside. The doctor was asking my mother-in-law if she had any idea what was wrong with my father-in-law. My mother-in-law said she knew nothing about it. Then we went into the room. My mother-in-law looked flustered. Oh, you guys came all the way here? Well, it's all right, she said. As long as I'm here, it'll be fine. But We are not going to let this chance pass us by. I said, I need to talk to you, and walked up to my mother-in-law. My husband, my brother-in-law, and his wife followed me. What the hell is wrong with you guys? My father-in-law's condition seems to be stabilized a bit, and his complexion was normal. But they didn't know the cause yet. Apparently, he was conscious for a while after arriving at the hospital. After going to the bathroom several times, he became dehydrated and completely lost consciousness. I looked my mother-in-law straight in the eye, took something out of my bag, and showed it to her. When my mother-in-law saw it, she got upset. Do you recognize this? Well, what is it? She was trying to play ignorance. This is a laxative. I don't know why there was a lot of powdered laxatives in the kitchen. My mother-in-law became silent. Then the doctor said, I see that he had these symptoms because he ingested a lot of laxatives. We'll run some tests later. By the way, if laxatives are detected, I'll have to ask him when he ingested laxatives. If he doesn't have any idea when he ingested the laxative, it means that he was intentionally given it by someone else. It would be an injury charge. When the doctor said that, my mother-in-law suddenly panicked. No, it's not like that. I didn't try to make him eat that food. It was negligence. My husband reacted to my mother-in-law's words. Then, who were you trying to feed that? Well, it's not. My mother-in-law climbed up. You're not going to tell us, so we'll have to call the police and have them check it out. When my husband said that, my mother-in-law said, Okay, I got it. And she confessed us everything. It was all for Elizabeth. I was going to punish her by feeding her a laxative meal. What do you mean, punish me? What did I do to you? Because my son married you. He's become a bad son. You didn't live with us and you didn't have a wedding. You're the one who persuaded him to do all of this. That's why you're my enemy. That's just unjustified resentment. My husband and I talked about that together. Is that why you've been putting laxatives in the food you've been feeding me? It wasn't a lot of laxatives before. That's why you've been fine. Don't be silly. I've even been rushed to the emergency room. How can you say that it wasn't a lot? My husband and brother-in-law followed my statement and blamed my mother-in-law. I can't forgive you to do that to my Elizabeth. I'd be furious too if my future wife would be like her. And then my husband and brother-in-law made a statement that they would disown my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law started to cringe. She was begging my husband and brother-in-law not to say such a thing. Then my father-in-law put the final nail in the coffin. My father-in-law seems to have woken up halfway through the conversation and was listening to us. You've done a terrible thing out of your ego. You should have been arrested by the police. I'm so disappointed in you. Even you say like that? You're not divorcing me, are you? That's not enough. You're going to pay Elizabeth $30,000. Of course, you'll have to work for it. I won't be helping you in any way. Oh no. It's impossible. I've been a stay-at-home mom my whole life. Shut up. If you don't accept these terms, I'll divorce you immediately and turn you into the police." "What?" My mother-in-law had no choice but to work and pay me $30,000. Now she's working hard and paying me little by little. My father-in-law is watching her and she can't cheat at all. All of her salary goes to pay that. She seems quite overwhelmed, but I think she deserves it because she hurt me that much. Meanwhile, my husband and I are living happily. My father-in-law and my husband told me that I don't have to see my mother-in-law again. I feel so much better now. I know I've been through a lot, but with my husband and father-in-law around, I know that I'll be okay no matter what happens. It's a crime to feed someone food containing laxatives, isn't it? Isn't it a little too much for a mother-in-law to do such a thing without any hesitation? I wonder why her father-in-law married such a person. But the two sons seem decent. Maybe her mother-in-law was decent to begin with. Well, I don't know the truth, but the punishment for the mother-in-law is appropriate. I hope that she will work hard and pay $30,000 to Elizabeth. And I hope Elizabeth and her husband will live happily ever after.